This is becoming a trend for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it just keeps getting worse. Russell Wilson, red zone turnovers, proving to be costly again, and Mike Tomlin speaks up about his team after a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. On Christmas, third loss in a row for the Steelers, and the sky is falling down. We're going to cover all of that today on Steelers Digest. My name is Remington Kuhn. First and foremost, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. 91% of you are not yet subscribed to the channel, so if you want the latest Pittsburgh Steelers content, hit that subscribe button, and we got you covered here on Steelers Digest. Let's dive right in. First segment today is He Said What? We're going to talk about what Tomlin said, what some players said, following the loss to Kansas City on Christmas. Obviously, another heartbreaking loss for us as Steelers fans. We first have to hear from Mike Tomlin. So what did Mike Tomlin have to say after the loss to Kansas City? Not the type of ball we want to play, and really kind of eerily similar to our last performance in that we're not doing the fundamental things well enough. And something else he said was we regressed in terms of our turnover culture, in terms of maintaining possession of the ball and getting the ball. We've been a plus group in most instances, and that's really been a catalyst for us in terms of the games unfolding the way that we desire. The last 2 weeks in particular, we haven't been plus in that area. We've been minus in that area, and that's why the results are the way they are. DeShon Elliott also had something to say after the loss. I feel like we communicated. Guys weren't doing their freaking job. Get back to the drawing board. It's week 17. Shouldn't be having these problems. This is a week 1, week 2 problem. So I don't know where we went down the line. Started becoming a whole different defense than we were. But we got to get back to who we are. And that's exactly right, DeShon Elliott. This does not look like the same team that the Steelers were. For a majority of the season, this was a dominant football team. They had a great identity. They have established this identity under Mike Tomlin, where they do not try to hide who they are. They are true to themselves, true to their morals, and exactly the type of team that they have been for the entire tenure of Mike Tomlin coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers. The team that I have watched over the last 3 games is not a Mike Tomlin Pittsburgh Steelers team. But really, you just have to acknowledge that the players, the coaches, nobody is happy with the way this team has played. 3 losses in 11 days, that has to be some kind of record. DeShon Elliott speaking out about his teammates, and Cam Hayward did similar things, speaking out against his teammates, saying that when 10 guys do their jobs and 1 guy doesn't, we are screwed. And that pretty much sums it up from the captain, Cam Hayward. If 1 guy is out there not doing his job, the rest of the team feels that. Now, was that a shot at the rest of the defense? I'm not sure who that's directed against, just like DeShon Elliott. I'm not sure who the comment might be directed towards, but obviously the players are not happy. They're starting to blame each other. You know, Russell Wilson took some responsibility in recent weeks when, he made his mistakes and owned up to it. Now we're starting to see the blame being scattered across the defense by DeShon Elliott, Cam Hayward. And that's the reality of the situation, is the team's just not playing well enough. And no matter who that player is, it's time to take accountability and turn the tide, because we're starting to run out of time. And like DeShon Elliott said, this is not something that should be happening in week 17, but it is. And that's the reality that we have to deal with right now, is that this Steelers team is not winning a playoff game. So we have to figure it out here before the playoffs. We already got in, lucky enough. We got the 10 wins, clinched a playoff spot, and that's when the sky started falling for the Steelers. But there's a lot of things that we have to clean up. So let's dive into the actual analysis of the game and talk about what happened on Wednesday in particular. The early struggles continue early in games. The Steelers fail on their first 2 drives. A pass to Pat Freiermuth set up a really nice opportunity on 2nd and short, but Najee got stuffed, and then Russ stumbles, gets sacked on 3rd and 2. He was sacked 5 times in the game, and it was just that early momentum that Kansas City carried throughout the rest of the game. You can't struggle that mightily early in games and expect to win the football game. You dig yourself in a big enough hole, and it's not a hole that you can come out of. So we look at the scoring summary here, and we noticed that Kansas City dominated the first quarter. They were up 13-0 before the Steelers could even answer back because of these terrible starts to games. They're having these dead-end drives killed by whether it's a penalty or a sack or a turnover. One way or another, these drives are getting killed, and the Steelers are digging themselves a hole that they can't dig out of. And that's what happened against Kansas City. You can't give up 13 points and dig yourself that big of a hole in the first quarter and expect to win the game. The Chiefs dominate early, and the Steelers continue to give up points in the first quarter. They lead the NFL in points allowed by first quarter this season. They have allowed 13 touchdowns in the first quarter this season, which is by far the most in the National Football League, and it continues to haunt the Steelers. As you look at that graphic there, the Steelers are dead last, 32nd in the NFL in points allowed in the first quarter. That is not a good stat to have, and that is just something that has plagued the Steelers all season long. These early deficits that they have to crawl back from. They are not moving the ball early in games. There's 3 and outs. They're punting the football, making their defense play way too many snaps, and just giving up touchdowns. And it ends up hurting them later in games because the defense becomes tired and the offense doesn't get a chance to have the football, to possess the ball. Now, the time of possession has been different the last 2 games than it was in the Philly game, so I can't blame time of possession, but I have to blame starting slow, because it's how you lost to the Colts and it's how you lost to Dallas. And actually it's how you lost to Cleveland as well. And oftentimes when you dig yourself these holes, you can't come back. The Steelers have this explosive offense, but without George Pickens, it was really hard to climb back in games. Now you get Pickens back, you get a couple of splash plays out of George Pickens, a couple of them called back due to penalties, a couple splash plays, and even a touchdown from Jalen Warren called back due to a penalty, and then an interception by Russell Wilson in the red zone. And this can't happen. And that brings me to my next point. Momentum is monumental. And it is monumental. The Steelers started to show signs of life. A monster play by George Pickens and then Jalen Warren with the touchdown, but it was called back due to a holding penalty, and you all know the story of what happens next. Red zone interception by Russell Wilson killed the drive and really killed the momentum for the rest of the football game for the Steelers. Now, they did start to show signs of life a little bit after that, and we're going to talk about that also in this video, but for the most part, it killed it. It killed all the momentum, and you can't really get it back after that. And it sucks for the Steelers because Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history in the red zone. This is one of the main reasons they made the switch at quarterback. They said that Russell Wilson gives them a better chance at scoring points in the red zone because the red zone offense struggled. But lately, the Steelers' offense in the red zone has been just as bad as it was when they benched Justin Fields. And Justin Fields only lost 1 game. I just want to let everybody know that. He went 6-1 as the Steelers' starting quarterback. So he was really solid for Pittsburgh. He made some catastrophic errors. But now Russell Wilson is making those same catastrophic errors. The same snake bite that bit the Steelers after week 7 is biting them again heading into week 17. It's the same problems that we had with Justin Fields. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is because Russell Wilson, like you see on the graphic, is historically one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history in the red zone. And that has not been the case. We talked about them digging themselves these holes in the first quarter, but also just not being able to get the momentum back. You know, a big turnover like Minkah Fitzpatrick got against the Baltimore Ravens, and then Russell Wilson throws a pick 6 to Marlon Humphrey. That can't happen. When you actually get the big play, the splash play that you need, or the turnover on defense, TJ Watt punching the ball out against the Eagles, and then you don't capitalize on it, it kills you. And that's what's literally happened to the Steelers 3 games in a row, is not being able to get that momentum swinging their way. Once that field is tilted, it's really hard to shift that tide. Even if you're at home, the crowd is out of it, it's too late. You just can't have that. And that's what's happened to the Steelers. These key plays that happen, unable to capitalize on key turnovers, unable to get key turnovers, unable to get those key stops, and then making those consequential errors in the red zone, which is what Russell Wilson never does, other than obviously you think back to the Super Bowl with Malcolm Butler. Everybody knows about that, you know, throw the ball instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch. But this is a different story with Russell Wilson. This is a Russell Wilson that's very experienced, and he has proven himself to be an efficient player in the red zone, but it has not been the case lately for the Steelers. Is it time for another QB change? I don't think so this late in the season. I want the Steelers to continue to ride his hand into the postseason, but the way he's been playing lately has not been good enough, and it's one thing to take responsibility for your actions. It's another thing to actually turn things around, and that's the point that the Steelers are at right now. Russell has to turn things around if the Steelers want to continue to win football games. They started to find their groove late in the second quarter. A methodical drive leads to a touchdown. That was after a couple of tip passes by TJ Watt, nearly resulting in interception. Patrick Queen wasn't able to hang on to the ball, but the Steelers defense stood tall. Some consecutive punts forced by the defense, and then the offense starts to work. They start to find a groove, start to find a rhythm, and a big reason for that is my guy, Jaylen Warren. And we have to talk about Jaylen Warren. We have to talk about Jaylen Warren because Jaylen Warren has started to get more and more snaps as the season gone on. Look at the last few weeks for Jaylen Warren. In week 17, he had a 53% snap share at the running back position. Week before that, 67%. Week before that, 53%. Week 14, 52. Now you have a fluke there at 36 in week 13, but then go back to week 12, 57%. As the season's gone on, he's continued to steal snaps away from Najee Harris, and he brings that explosive element to the Steelers offense. He was one of their best players in the game against the Chiefs. The Steelers run game was not the problem. They ran for over 200 yards, okay? So that 11-play scoring drive capped by a Russell Wilson rushing touchdown was started by Pickens, Warren, and Freiermuth. And that's what you have to take into account is that those key playmakers are making key plays. They're getting those first downs. They're making those big catches. George Pickens looked fine in his first game back from injury, but Jaylen Warren was the main player that I really looked for, and he contributed a lot to that offense and was the main reason why they were able to score on that drive. He scored a touchdown that got called back, like we said, to the holding penalty. He just played really well. I don't think Jaylen Warren gets nearly enough credit. He has been their better running back, the better running back than Najee Harris, and he's continued to earn more playing time from Mike Tomlin and from Arthur Smith in the personnel groupings. And you see it there with the breakdown as the season has gone on. So Jaylen Warren is getting more playing time, continuing to earn more playing time, and the defense was able to keep the Chiefs in check for just enough time, and then a holding penalty pushed Kansas City out of field goal range, which was another key stop for the Steelers. So they're starting to find a groove. Another thing that they did is they showed some fight. They were showing fight in the second half, in the third quarter. Chiefs had to settle for a field goal. Steelers defense making them work for it. And then the Steelers respond with a Boswell field goal. And can you say enough about this Chris Boswell guy? He is having one of the historically best kicker seasons in NFL history. NFL history. He still has his eyes set on history. It's becoming less and less possible with only one game left. But look at the numbers. Chris Boswell is having the second greatest season in history by a kicker in the NFL. David Akers is the only kicker to make more field goals in a season than Chris Boswell has for the Steelers this year. And you think back to the Ravens game that the Steelers actually won. They didn't score a touchdown in that game. It was Chris Boswell field goal after Chris Boswell field goal, and the guy doesn't miss. He's been so efficient all year, haven't had to worry about him missing extra points, which Butker did in that game for the Chiefs. I mean, it's just one thing after another for the Steelers that's a problem. But if you look at some of the positives, Chris Boswell has been a force. He has been consistent all year long. Boswell made it a 6-point game with another clutch field goal. That was the Steelers' response in that third quarter, and they needed to continue to cut the deficit down, and the rest is history. I mean, the Chiefs started to run away with it. I like the fight that I saw from the Steelers in that third quarter, and then the fourth quarter happened, and that's where we get to the annual Steelers collapse. Missed opportunities. Chiefs pulled ahead. Kelsey took over. Chiefs take a commanding 19-point lead, and they did not look back. Final score was 29-10, and just another heartbreaker for us. I mean, you think back to the Eagles game, they had a chance, and then the fumble by Najee Harris. You think back to the Ravens game, interception by Minka, his first of the season, and then the pick six to Marlon Humphrey killed the vibe. And then this Chiefs game, similar things. You could argue the red zone interception was the deciding factor. You could argue the team just gave up in the fourth quarter. I don't know what you want to argue. The Chiefs scored on the first play in the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly, and that was just a dagger. It's a trend with these Steelers in the last 3 games. They've only scored 4 touchdowns, and that's just not going to cut it. You lost to the Eagles. Okay, they're a really good football team. You lost to the Ravens. They're also a really good football team. You lost to the Chiefs. Very good football team. Those are the kind of teams you're going to have to play in the playoffs, so you better get used to it. I mean, false start on 4th and 15 pushed us back to 4th and 20, and then a turnover on downs. Najee dropping a high throw from Russ on a 3rd and 2. Steelers have to punt on 4th and 2. I don't know what to say. I'm at a loss for words with this team. I love this team with all my heart. All of you love this team as well. I was over there waving my terrible towel. We were down 29-10, and I'm still fighting, hoping that the team can at least score and have a positive to go off of heading into next week against the Bengals. But Mike Tomlin waved the white flag as I was waving the terrible towel, and it is what it is. But you can look at that graphic and tell me 10 different things of why we lost this game. But I do have one more thing to talk about. We have one more topic to really cover today, and that's what the division odds look like after this game against Kansas City and after the Ravens laid into the Houston Texans. Obviously, we already clinched a playoff spot. Pretty much the playoff field is decided other than that final seed, which the Broncos are hanging on to for dear life. They will play Cincinnati this Saturday. And if you look at the Steelers' chances to win the division, it's about a 7% chance. The odds of the Steelers winning the division were pretty favorable heading into the last few weeks and even heading into the Ravens game. But once they lost that Ravens game, it was pretty much over, especially after the loss to the Chiefs. The Chiefs secured the number 1 seed in the bye week and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And here the Steelers are sitting with our hands pretty much tied, needing other teams to help us out to have a chance. But we controlled our own destiny and failed. So you just got to give credit where credit is due to the Ravens. The Ravens put on a clinic against the Houston Texans right after the Steelers lost to Kansas City on Christmas. And you can't say enough about how that Ravens team is playing right now. We just have to pray as Steelers fans. We don't have to play Buffalo or the Ravens in the first round of the playoffs. If we want to break that slump of playoff losses, and I have confidence if we play Houston. As bad as we looked the last 3 weeks, if we can somehow play the Houston Texans in the first round, I think that streak ends. I think we win a playoff game. Now, if we win that playoff game, that means we might have some momentum heading into the next round. We're already in the playoffs, so let's just somehow hold on to that number 5 seed. Let's play Houston, the 4 seed in that first round, and let's beat Houston, and then anything can happen. It's anybody's game after that. So let's just pray that we play Houston in the first round, because I said it in previous episodes. I don't want to play Buffalo. I don't want to play Baltimore, but I'd love to play Houston in the first round, and then anything can happen. We have a lot of time off before our next game after playing 3 games in 11 days. You guys know how I feel about that. You know how Big Ben feels about that. If you don't, go back and watch the last episode of Steelers Digest. But a lot of fun things to come. We still have a playoff game to look forward to, even though we probably won't be hosting that playoff game. But our next game is January 5th against the Cincinnati Bengals at 1 o'clock. The Bengals will be playing on Saturday, which is tomorrow. I'm anxious to see how they play against the Broncos, and then we'll have plenty of time to rest up before our last game of the season. We still want to win that game to keep the Bengals out of the playoffs and for playoff seeding in order to be able to play the Texans in the first round. But thank you guys for sitting here and watching this episode of Steelers Digest. My name is Remington Kuhn. If you haven't already, like I said, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all of you watching this channel, and 91% of you have not yet subscribed. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more Steelers content. We'll have more videos to come. And yeah, thanks for watching this episode of Steelers Digest. Hopefully our boys can turn it around soon. And again, we'll have plenty of updates as the week goes on, leading up to our next game against Cincinnati. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Steelers Digest.